ready. Okay, welcome back. We're done with module 1. On to the next thing, on to the next adventure. The next thing coming up is in October, which is crazy that that's like right around the corner. But here we go, straight into the straight into the next couple of weeks. So homework 2 will be due that October 3rd, and then we'll have a couple of days work on project number 2. Have you had a chance to look at like what is module 2? It's okay if you haven't. Do you know like roughly what you're getting into? What? That's okay. Yeah. We just finished one module, so this is like the beginning of something new. But kind of like a rough outline of where we're headed in module 2 is like in the first module we were kind of like cutting our teeth, getting into Python, using Jupyter notebooks, thinking about what is error, like how do we compare one result to another. Now we're going to start looking at like once we have either a model or an experiment, like just lots of data, what do we do with that? Like how do we describe it? How do we display it? What kind of statistics are important for data sets and that kind of thing. And then since we're dealing with data and statistics, Monte Carlo is a nice way of like taking equations that you already know, and it's a fancy way of saying like I threw a bunch of random numbers at it and now I know something more to it, like whether that's like how much stress is in this part. Throw a whole bunch of random forces at it and now you have like what is the average stress and what's the standard deviation on that stress based on some input of how much force you. And we can even do some fancy stuff like some New York Stock Exchange predictions of what our stock's going to do with a random walk hypothesis. Yeah. Has anyone found anything interesting or start off with questions or demos for anything? I can also check in and see where we're at and then come back up. Try that. So one of the reasons that I like think that this module is especially important is that trying to like get you out of Excel. Like I think at this point like 90% of engineering like the most popular engineering software is Microsoft Excel, but it becomes so like it's so hard to use and it's so hard to help other people use, so it turns into these like complicated like hidden functions and all this stuff. But meanwhile, if you're using like Python or Jupyter notebooks or any kind of like reproducible data processing like process, now other people can look at your work, they can kind of debug, and there's a lot of issues that you can pick up along the way. So let's mix a little bit of like classic coding with like modern actual like how do people get things done. So like I know that I have a CSV file and I know it's called Beers CSV, and this is what it looks like. Like this is when I use this head command in Linux is a way of like looking at the first 10 lines. You can also ask for more lines if you want, but by default, it shows you the first 10 lines of that file. And CSVs are typically something with commas separating all they call it comma separated values. So it's a mix of numbers, indices, names, and then other stuff, more numbers over there. So I have a data set in beers.csv that looks like this. Oh, not that. I want to take this. So I'm just going to copy this output how do I load it into a pandas data frame? And I'm not doing like a lot of prompt engineering to kind of give it better specifications, but I'm telling ChatGPT like, hey, here's my file. This is what it looks like. And I don't need to give it the whole file because it's a whole bunch of repeating rows of the same stuff. But asking it like, how do I get it into pandas data frame? So get it out of Excel into pandas. Oh, yeah, it even tells you how to install pandas. But the main thing that it's telling you is like, hey, use this command read CSV and load that into DF, like data frame. And sure enough, that's exactly what we do on the next line of like beers pd.read CSV. One of the first things we talked about in the semester was like, what's okay to copy from either another source or AI models in general. One line of code like this, I mean, you could, if you wanted to really cover all your bases, you could say like from ChatGPT IO, like I was asking ChatGPT and I got this, but really this line of code is in every documentation and every blog post that has to do with pandas. So I wouldn't worry about it because it's been done so many times. And this might give you like a place to start of like, all right, pd.read CSV. Let me Google search that. And it brings me like to the documentation for read CSV. And there's all these other options where I could have like, do I want to keep the NA values? Do I want to specify how many rows there are? Anything like that. Anything worthwhile? Delim white space. So I could have like delimiter white space if there's like, if I want to like format in a certain way. Skip footer is sometimes good, or skip rows. Like if there's like a title row and then the actual stuff starts. But again, sometimes that's a nice way to go. It's like take the ChatGPT result, Google search like what it gave you, and then get back to like the original source of information. I was just listening to like a podcast about like open science and AI models this morning. So I was like, oh yeah, we should revisit that since that is the current state of like development. Like if you're developing code or even writing a paper, like the current process is like ChatGPT is part of your like development process. Yeah, anyway. All right, but then the cool part is now that whole CSV file, and this is not a big data problem. Like we're not dealing with like gigabytes or terabytes of data. We're not like Google or Facebook where we have like millions of users and they have pictures and all this stuff. It's kind of like a few thousand rows of very easy to process data. So overall, this thing, we looked it up last class, but beers.csv, we're dealing with 159 kilobytes worth of data, very tiny. But it doesn't mean that it's not a data problem. We still have to deal with all the stuff involved in processing the data. And we could organize, because we're in Jupyter Notebooks, we could like organize it by style and say like, okay, it starts off alphabetically from American stuff to Belgian. Why is this Schwarzbier? Doesn't seem like that would come after Belgian, but anyway. Or we could look at ABV, like alcohol by volume, top to bottom. You know, we could play around with like what we want to look at, what kind of subsets of data we want to start looking at. Yeah. And this is from like the first reading, so I think the only thing I added was that like from ChatGPT.
So in for line 46.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I'm doing is just saying like, show me that variable that is now a pandas data frame. How do I show a run button on? Yeah. Cell run. See, but then, oh, and then maybe that's where that execute timer came from too. But this one tells me how long, but it doesn't have the run. No, it didn't work. I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. Then it's probably like in the help. Notebook help? No, not that one. Val, no. But usually what I do, like instead of like clicking the run button, I hold shift and enter. And that way you're not, but yeah, sometimes people like the click interface. I've just gotten so used to doing everything on a keyboard. You mean like? Yeah. You mean like for this class?
No, yeah, no, that's not kind of no, yeah, for this class.
I mean that sounds like one line of code is everywhere.
I see what you're saying.
Like I don't know if I would give credit to ChatGPT for that.
If I just spelled it 17 lines.
Yeah, and even like if I Google that and find it somewhere else, it's everywhere. That line, like p.csv. The fact that ChatGPT plugged in my file name here to CSV is sort of, I don't even know if I would give it credit for that. My point was like if you use it and you didn't really just think like if you're trying to keep a note to yourself, like look, I got this from ChatGPT, maybe I should go back and check it, or maybe I should Google this later or something. That's more. And then for me, it's more like reproducible. Same things like Java strings myself. When I go back and reread it, did I come up with this? Did it come from like a blog post somewhere? So I usually try to like reference where I get my code.
Okay. Because I had to like I was trying to do it for the last one. And it was just like I was trying to do this. And then we're giving the PLT on the top. So
Yeah.
I have to change it. It's just it's really good for
import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was like I was sitting here and
Yeah.
what do you mean it's not the box? Like I was so upset for so long.
Yeah.
So I feel like for like those type of things, like troubleshooting, I feel like it's good for that because we'll just tell you once it's like a big sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know like okay, no, rest of it. We'll call it 5 or something. This base sentence. So I get why like 15 sentences straight.
Yeah. And if you're in even like bigger things, if it's still something that everybody uses all the time, like if you're importing NumPy, matplotlib, and pandas, probably 2 million different Python codes. So to say that ChatGPT created that is sort of like, all right, no, we got it from everybody else's work. Yeah.
And then also,
yeah, you could use like local
or you better.
Yeah. As long as
they base it.
well, there is like llama, but Olam is free AI, free training results. And you run it on yeah, you install it on your own. That one you'd have to check, but everything is local work. Because mostly like when you give stuff to ChatGPT, like it goes into a database. Like, these are what users are asking, and this is the information that they said was good and bad. So it's further training their models. So if you have defense work, yeah. So if you have defense work, you're like giving it things that are potentially mission critical, then now anyone without anyone at that company that doesn't have security clearance now has access to someone that does.
That's mostly
yeah, no. But if you're running it locally, it's all
yeah.
I think it was a lot of times they have other.
But it's still like very underground. I feel like
Yeah.
for most part, that's where it's
Like some stuff, depending on which group you're at, right? Some of them will lay Python. So see people like that, you do all their own things in Excel. That is a government approved software.
we can use it.
Yeah.
But most every everything more comfortable. I feel like now there's more like the third generation
Yeah. Yeah. And now there's Python in Excel. You can do Python coding in your Excel files.
I actually have no idea like how Excel has been in the past. Nowadays, I've never really heard of the usage of
Excel is actually like what I didn't know basically what I was using Excel for until I got like you can make a whole sheet of like recaps and plug in your numbers and I'll just calculate it all out.
Oh, I thought yeah, but like how to figure it out.
Because that's like it's just already set for you. For example, like
I mean, to me, it makes more sense to use like Python or MATLAB or anything
Yeah.
where like you don't have to actually look at the raw data, you can visualize the data. And it's so hard because like trying to create a 3D plot in Excel basically impossible. Like that first just like a contour plot.
oh
that we made.
yeah,
It was like one line of code and we had a contour plot. 100 data points on an XY axis. To do that in Excel would take you hours. Like custom, yeah, it would be such a pain. And I know people that do it and they like it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because it's the same guy stuff with I'm not negative. Like it's just not.
I mean, if you can do one or the other, you're like translate, write it in one, translate to another.
I don't know. I feel like it's just using the actual website. Like the whole, yeah, the whole like it's not integrated, but like with one, you have to click one and simulate it well. So I'm like sitting there looking at my, why is it simulating the same thing as my previous example? You can use it. That just tells me what
So one like confusing thing that didn't come up yet, but I wanted to talk about is like these missing values, like an NaN. It's like it's a not available number, like, or nothing, like nothing is there. And if I'm looking for those, where'd it go? There. Like it has like a certain value, like it's stored in the computer as NaN. But if I say like, is NaN equal to NaN? What do you think? Is this true or false? I mean, it's the same thing on the left side as the right side, right? Like NaN equal NaN. Is that a true statement or a false statement? I know everybody's got other stuff going on. Because this comes up when you're like trying to figure out how many missing values are there in a data set. When you're trying to figure out like what's missing, what percent, like how much data do I have to work with. And if I'm just trying to say like, is it equal to NaN, that it's always false, because NaN is just something missing. So it's not necessarily that it's equal to another missing value, it's just that neither of them are there. So instead, in NumPy, we have is NA. Oh, sorry, is NaN. So you can use is NaN in NumPy to figure out like, are there missing values in your array? So if I have an array full of like one missing value and then 2, 1, 2. Oh. Then I get like a true, a false, a false. And then for my data frame for beers, I could write is NA, which is what I was trying to use before. And then let's open close. And now it gives me a list of every time it's true and every time it's false. So anywhere that there is an NA value, it says true. And once I have these like Boolean values, I can use that to index beers. So if I just want to figure out that IBU, like when is that an NA, I could grab all the rows that are true and look at like, all right, how many values were there with an NAN in that column, and it shows me there's 1,000 rows. Or I could say like, well, all I want is the stuff that's not NAN, so a little tilde, and now I have a new data frame where everything, there are no NANs in that IBU column anymore. Like beers clean equals that, something like that. But I could create like a whole new data frame that way. So there's isNA to look for NANs in a pandas data frame. If it was me, I would make them both the same function, like isNA or isNAN. Just pick one, but I don't know. There's a lot of other people involved in developing these. But we have isNAN for NumPy arrays, if you load it into NumPy, and then isNA for pandas data frames. Look for those missing values. And then once you have true and false statements, you can always index things with Boolean arrays like that.
Yes, the chassis technology exists, but they also have
No, the ones are made by the same thing. Ironman are active.
So we just have a couple of minutes left, so we'll play around with like how to explore, because this is really like this, at least the first reading and kind of some of the first parts of the homework are just exploring data, like load it all into your computer and start figuring out a way of making sense of it. So with pandas, I can ask for like different column names. So I could say like ABV, and it'll show me all the ABV stuff there. Or I could look for like multiple things of like ABV and IBU and name. And now it creates like a smaller data frame that's only ABV, IBU, and that name. And also, like a lot of times, I don't remember if this is capital or lowercase or what. So I need to know, like, all right, what are the column names of this data frame? When I loaded it in, how do I actually use those? So if you write out columns, then I can look at like, all right, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns in here. So I could even like say like number 1. If I just look at column 1, it's ABV. So that's like, or if I want to look at the first 1 to 3, that's ABV and IBU. And you can give it like, because it's an index of those things, I could like create a variable and like subset that data frame that way. And yeah. We could look at like just the high alcohol beers, like just get a subset of that and say, when is ABV more than 7%? And then we get like Rise of the Phoenix, Sex and Candy, Black Exodus. Oh, there's 400 beers. So let's go even higher. Bigger is better, right? let's look at 8% alcohol, and now we've got 190 beers. Anything over 10%? Whoa, yeah. Here we go. Now we're getting into like the extreme, the Russian Imperial Stout, the barley wine. I don't know what the quadruple is, but then dry beer down there. Now we got like the high octane beers. But cool. So now you have like some data to play with. Maybe go sample these and then come back on Monday. We'll continue working through data frames and all these statistics. All right, thanks a lot.